Okay. Right, everyone. Hello. Thank you so much for your patience as we've been working through a few tech issues, but we are ready. Um, so thank you so much, you all, for joining our panel this evening. I just want to offer a special welcome to the Kashi lineage and the Bhumi lineage today, to all the teachers of our lineages. Um, we just welcome you into the space and this day of celebration of remembering freedom and remembering the work and the dedication to liberation that it's so important to kind of invest in as well. And remembering this on Juneteenth, which is this day where we remember the ending of American slavery, the American slavery, of African people, of African descendant people. And we remember this day, to also remember that we still have work to do in this struggle to not only get socially free, but we have work to do to get ultimately free. And for me, Juneteenth reminds me that I have to bring both of these liberation struggles together. I have to bring both the social liberation as well as the ultimate liberation together into this collaboration where both the social and the ultimate work begins to inform one another, right? Where the work of freedom, social freedom, is informed by love, by compassion, but it's also informed by a directness, and an honesty and a fierceness, and all this is so important to me. And I wear the symbol of a movement, a party that has been so instrumental in my development as someone committed to social liberation. The work of the Black Panther Party movement, the Black Power movement, has so deeply informed, how I understand myself as a person of African descent, but also as a person who cares about freedom, who cares about, doing the work in order to cut through the chaos that, samsara, this will of confusion and delusion kind of digs up for us. But so this is our Black Liberation panel where we will be exploring both the social and ultimate liberation within the Black body with our panelists, Sadala Jackson, Baba Devi Jaya, Shane Roberts, and Rashid Hughes. And I will introduce them more thoroughly in just a few moments. But again, my name is Lamarad. I am one of the founding teachers of Bhumi Sparsha. I'm also a member of Kashi as well. And these are two lineages that I hold very dearly, very closely. Maja Sati Bhagavati, though I did not know her in this life, is definitely one of my teachers. And she has, also, I feel her in this space as well. I feel her dancing in this space and encouraging us to move forward with the work of liberation in the same way that she in her life worked for the liberation of so many beings, particularly the beings and folks who felt most marginalized, often who felt most thrown away. As she has often said, there are no throwaway people, and that teaching, is so important, for the work of getting people free, because we have to get everyone free. Everyone has to be invited into the space for the work of freedom. So we're going to get started. I want to just set up the space a little bit before we start inviting our panelists for our discussion tonight. One thing you may notice that we've actually suspended, disabled, the chat function. And I have found that when we get into discussions like that, like this, the chat box can actually become a little bit of a distraction. And so we just kind of invite you to kind of bring your attention into the space right now, into what's being offered for us, to sit with, to digest, to contemplate, to think through. We invite you to hold the dialogue with a sense of spaciousness, with a sense of care. You know, I don't think this will be necessarily an easy dialogue to listen to, but I really encourage you to fall back into your practice, to hold everything that arises for us in this practice, listening deeply, listening from a place of compassion, meaning that we're holding space for our own discomfort, and we're acknowledging that we're not the only ones who are experiencing discomfort as well. So acknowledging that and holding that, and not running away from that discomfort, right? But just sitting with it, taking care of it. Calling in your sources of refuge, right? To help you hold what's being offered. And this is an offering. This is also an invitation, right? This is an invitation to sit and to listen to how people of African descent, Black identified folks, talk about what it means to be liberated, and to sit with this panel of people dedicated to liberation, both social liberation, but also dedicated to spiritual liberation. Our panelists are practitioners, they're yogis, all of them are yogis, they're meditators, they're yoga teachers, all four of them are, and some train at Kashi, some at other places. Myself included, who's trained at Kashi in teacher training. So their sharing is coming from an embodied place, and I really invite you to trust that embodiment, and that you're being invited into something. You're being invited to listen to something, and we don't want you to be ashamed of that listening. We don't want you to feel as if you're eavesdropping in something that is none of your business. This is your business. Liberation is your business. The value of Black life in this moment has to be all of our business, right? Until everyone is free, within the social context, no one is free, as Paulo Freire, wrote in The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, it is the oppressor is as bound and trapped as those that they oppressed, right? And so the oppressor is bound by the ways in which they express their hatred, in many ways, their hatred of those that they are oppressing. They're bound by that, where oppressed folks are bound by the actual manifestation of social oppression, but everyone has to be free, until everyone is free, no one is free. And we start with those folks in society who are still struggling to experience social liberation, and we want to bring our practice into understanding what that social liberation is. We want to bring our practice into creating a context that holds the struggle and the work of social liberation, because we want our work to be sustainable. We want our work of social liberation to be restorative. We want it to be generative. And we have to call upon our spiritual practice in order to support the work of social liberation. So I just wanted to share that. So again, welcome. I know folks are just coming into the room still. Welcome again to our panel tonight, Talking Black Liberation, exploring both the social and ultimate liberation in the Black body. I want to just spend just a few moments just offering a little bit of a guiding practice. And I will probably, depending on the conversation, depending on how we go tonight, I will just kind of pop in at different points, maybe, and offer some guiding practices to just invite you to come back into the space, come back to your seat, come back into holding space for what seems, kind of edgy, coming up in your practice. We won't. Having dialogues like this requires us to be in relationship with discomfort. If we choose not to be in relationship to discomfort, then we're choosing not to actually evolve, to grow, to deepen, right? And so let's not do the easy work of bypassing. Let's do the really hard work, the really generative, restorative work of being with what arises for us. Okay. So let's just begin. And of course, I want to kind of begin by just inviting the mother into this space. And of course, Green Tara is one form of the mother that I am devoted to. So I just want to summon the mother into this space. You may join me. I'm just going to offer a chant that I often use if you joined us for the fire puja this morning. It's the very same chant, Om Matara Soha. Okay. Om Matara Soha. Om Matara Om Matara Soha. Om Matara And I invite you just to lean into however you're noticing the mother showing up for you in the space around you or within you. And just allow her to be here in this space. And I invite you to now shift your attention down to your seat, just noticing the weight of your body, noticing the sensations of your body, making contact with the seat. And I wonder if you can trust the seat to hold you. Can you trust the seat to remain a foundation as we move into this important and sacred dialogue and conversation? And I invite you to shift your attention even lower and touching into the earth. And it doesn't matter if you're sitting on the floor and if this floor is several floors up from the actual earth, the floor that we're sitting on is still an expression of the earth. So I invite you to touch into the earth. We call this Bhumi Sparsha actually, and Bhumi Sparsha actually means touching the earth. A practice that comes directly from the enlightenment work of the Buddha, who upon his enlightenment touched the earth both physically and with his attention, to ask the earth to validate his right to become enlightened, to witness the work that he did in order to achieve that awakening. But as we touch into the earth, we allow the earth to hold us, to take care of us. Remembering that no matter what happens in this dialogue, we can always come back to the earth and to ask the earth to actually hold us. And I invite you now to shift your attention up to your heart center. And if you are able to, noticing the contact of your palm, your hand on your heart center. And for me, sometimes when I place my hand on my heart center, I love to feel the weight, the pressure of my palm on my heart center. It helps me to feel more stable, more grounded. It allows me to feel more held. And sometimes I like to imagine that this palm, this hand on my heart center is actually the hand of the mother holding me, grounding me, giving me something to kind of hold on to. When it becomes so easy to escape our bodies. And in this space, I invite you to begin to reflect on something that you're grateful for. Something or someone. Maybe you're grateful for something that has happened today in one of the many programs that we've been able to offer. And I invite you to allow that energy of gratitude just to begin to circulate through your experience, through the mind, through your body. And I invite you to imagine that from your heart center begins to radiate with this energy of gratitude. And it's radiating this white light, as if the sun is rising in your heart center, and the rays of the sun is the energy of gratitude. And this energy of gratitude, as light begins to radiate from your heart center, filling your space up with this energy and light of gratitude. And as the space begins to fill with this energy of gratitude, we imagine that this energy begins to invite our folks. And our folks are our benefactors, our guardians, our guides, our deities, our ancestors, our lineage. We invite all the beings who love us, who care about us. And as they arrive, we invite them to sit in the space around us. And they begin to form a circle around us, which is a circle of care. They begin to radiate this energy of care into the space around us. And this energy of care just begins to blanket us. It begins to wrap around us. And it's something that holds us, takes care of us. We don't feel so alone with this energy being radiated. And slowly this energy begins to sink into our bodies, slowly kind of seeping into our skin and into our muscles and bones. Into our tissue and other organs. And so we find ourselves deeply saturated with this energy of care. And as we continue our dialogue tonight, our work, I encourage you to remember that you're being held by beings that love you, that you're being held by the seeds, you're being held by the earth, who is also an expression of the mother. You're being held by the energy of gratitude. You're being held by the mother. And remember that you're not alone. Remember that there are other beings for us to lean on, to rely on, as we enter into this dialogue. Okay, so thank you all so much for your practice. Thank you for those who just joined. We just finished a grounding practice. So again, our occasion today is Juneteenth. Juneteenth is the celebration of the ending of systematic slavery in the United States. It was on January 1st, 1863, that Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed all slaves. Of course, that freeing of slaves only happened in places in the South where there were sufficient number of Union troops to ensure that freedom. It wasn't until 1865, June 19th, 1865, 2.5 years after the proclamation, the Emancipation Proclamation, that Major General Gordon Granger landed in Galveston, Texas, to offer the last declaration of freedom for the remaining slaves in Texas and within the Galveston area. So 150 years, 155 years later, we find ourselves on this day in another movement of freedom. You know, the celebration of Juneteenth is a recognition of the resiliency of the Black community and an honoring of the sacrifices made by the ancestors of Black Americans. During this period of renewed movement for Black lives, you know, Juneteenth is a day that reminds us that we still have work to do, that America will never be free until all lives, especially the lives of Black folks, are valued, validated, and loved. It was Mother Assata Shakur, who was a member of the Black Liberation Army, who said, "This is the 21st century, and we need to redefine revolution. This planet needs a people's revolution, a humanist revolution. Revolution is not about bloodshed or about going to the mountains and fighting. We will fight if we are forced to, but the fundamental goal of revolution must be peace. We need a revolution of the mind. We need a revolution of the heart. We need a revolution of the spirit. The power of the people is stronger than any weapon. A people's revolution can't be stopped. We need to be weapons of mass construction, weapons of mass love. It's not enough just to change the system. We need to change ourselves. We have got to make this world user-friendly. User-friendly. Are you ready to sacrifice to end world hunger, to sacrifice to end colonialism, to end neo-colonialism, to end racism, to end sexism. Revolution means the end of exploitation. Revolution means respecting people from other cultures. Revolution is creative. Revolution means treating your mate as a friend and an equal. Revolution is sexy. Revolution means respecting and learning from your children. Revolution is beautiful. Revolution means protecting the people, the plants, the animals, the air, the water. Revolution means saving this planet. Revolution is love. I am thinking about Mother Angela Davis, who said, revolution is a serious thing, the most serious thing about a revolutionary's life. When one commits oneself to struggle, it must be for a lifetime. I also remember that June is Pride Month, and I remember our ancestors in Stonewall, that June in 1969. I am remembering Marsha P. Johnson, one of my ancestors as well, not a familial ancestor, but an ancestor, as a queer identified person. And she says, no pride for some of us without liberation for all of us. The Black Panthers had a 10-point plan. And the number 10 on that 10-point plan was, we want land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, and peace. And finally, the movement for Black lives currently demands an end to the war against Black people. Since this country's inception, there have been named and unnamed wars on our communities. We demand an end to the criminalization, the incarceration, and killing of our people. So this is our discussion in our panel. We are now experiencing a renewed period of movement for Black lives, sparked by the continued reality of systematic racism, expressing itself through many ways, especially through police brutality. While social liberation is important, how can we also continue our practice for ultimate liberation? As people of African descent, how do we begin to bridge both our need for social liberation with our desire for ultimate liberation? In this panel that we're about to start, we will explore the meaning of Black liberation and how we might bridge our social liberation work with our spiritual liberation work. And in some way, the panelists coming forward will discuss this theme, in various ways. We will use as guideposts, exploring perhaps the meaning of liberation, how Blackness informs spiritual practice and practice for ultimate liberation, how Black liberation struggle frees not only Black folks, but all people, how spiritual practice can disrupt systematic racism, and how social activism and spiritual practice can inform each other. So it is my pleasure to introduce our panelists for our discussion. Our first panelist, I will introduce all the panelists, and they will come up one by one in the order that I introduce them. So our first panelist I will introduce or read, and introduce is Sadada Jackson. Sadada is a student of practice who lives in her body and vacations in her mind. She has a master's in theological studies from Harvard and Indigenous Traditions, a master's in education in secondary English language arts from UMass Boston. She is a certified 200 yoga teacher, Hatha yoga, and yoga therapeutics teacher. Trained with Bo Forbes. She works as a coach, a consultant, and a facilitator with individuals and groups who do the work of healing and educating. The goal of her work is to end the relational and the structural violences impacting all marginalized bodies, particularly Black and Indigenous bodies. She is Nipmuc. Next, after Siddhartha, we will have Baba Devi Jaya. Baba Devi Jaya began her yogic practices in 1998 with Swami Jaya Devi Bhagavati and Ma Jaya Sati Bhagavati. After already being a spiritual practitioner for many years, Baba Devi deepened her practice and completed the Kashi Atlanta's first classical yoga teacher training in 2004, and has also completed Kalinatha teacher training. Sharing what she has learned with Majaya and Swami Jaya Devi over the past 15 years, Baba Devi teaches meditation practices to connect to the divine within, tools to prevent burnout, and serving and increased emotional and physical health through pranayama and meditation in the Sunday 10 a.m. beginners meditation class. Baba Devi is also the manager of Kashi Ashram and a resident since 2006. After Baba Devi, we will have Shane Roberts. Shane Roberts completed his 200-hour yoga teacher's training at Kashi Atlanta Urban Ashram in 2014. A human who formerly identified as a Los Angeles gang member and who was formerly incarcerated, Shane uses his experience in the streets to organize Black males towards life-affirming practices and political empowerment. Along with his wife and fellow Kashi Atlanta graduate and former Kashi teacher Chelsea Jackson Roberts, Shane co-founded Red Clay Yoga in Atlanta, where they host yoga, literature, and art camp for teens at Spelman College Museum of Fine Arts. Shane developed a curriculum for yoga and race, an intro course to social justice, which was taught at Kashi Atlanta in 2014. Shane also has facilitated workshops and consulted with corporations and universities that are interested in creating generative work environments that prioritize the lived experiences of descendants of American chattel slavery and Jim Crow. And lastly, we have Rashid Hughes. Rashid is a native of Richmond, Virginia. He is a proud graduate of the Howard University Department of Music and the Howard University School of Divinity. Rashid is a certified mindfulness and yoga teacher and a restorative justice specialist in Washington, D.C. In 2019, Rashid co-founded the Heart Refuge Mindfulness Community, a mindfulness community in Washington, D.C. that is dedicated to inspiring Black, Indigenous, and people of color to live with love and courage. Rashid's devotion to truth and compassion leads him to teach faith-based and non-religious audiences, including secular mindfulness communities, Buddhist sanghas, and the Black church. The teachings of James Baldwin, Toni Morrison, and the music of Miles Davis and John Coltrane are deep sources of inspiration and hope for Rashid. Rashid is devoted to helping all people achieve fulfillment through radical honesty and self-compassion. So I want to just honor these panelists as they will begin to come forward one by one to offer their reflections and their wisdom. And then after all the panelists have gone, we will have a group discussion. And you will see at the bottom of your screen, ask a question. So you may see the phrase ask a question. That is a box that you will be able to post your questions as they come up for the group discussion after the dialogues or after each individual sharing. So I would like to ask Sister Siddhartha to come to the screen, and I will make my way off the screen.
One again, everyone. Wanino Kishkwatuan from Konipia. Today, it's really good to be here with all of you. And welcome. My name is Siddhartha, and I'm greeting you in my native language, which is Nipmuc, and I'm also a Black woman. And for us Nipmucs, like, our history of our Blackness and our Nativeness are equal. They're the same. So I want to talk, I'll start, I guess, talking about liberation and what I mean by liberation. You know, for me, liberation is not about what I don't want, but it's about what I want. In some ways, what I need, you know, and I'm not unique in that need. It's an experience and an expression of love. The liberation in this way, what I mean by love is that I mean this constant, unceasing presence within and around me of spaciousness and care. I experience this not just in myself, but with people and places and systems, worldviews and structures that I encounter in my body. There is a requirement, though, for this liberation that's outside of my practice. And that is for the people that I want to at least want me to be not only liberated, but to have liberation for themselves. As an expression, liberation, there is a willingness deep inside of myself to be free. And this means that I am willing to do the work of my liberation. Sometimes it looks like not taking my own shit or the shit of others. And sometimes it means investing in my joy and my love for myself and for those who love me, which also means divesting in things that are not doing that, in places that are not doing that, and in people that are not doing that. This is a practice of liberation, of turning to love, the liberator of my heart and my soul's desire. And so for me, as a Black, female, Native person, these identities are at the center of everything that I do for liberation, whether it be spiritual practices or ultimate liberation or social liberation. That, like my body, I bring my identities into everything that I do. And for me, my Blackness is no different than my Nativeness. These are both Indigenous identities. They might not be Indigenous of the same lands, but they are both Indigenous identities. And as a devotee to Oshun, as a practitioner of my Indigenous practices, both of my teacher who's Mayan and my land practices here where I reside currently in the Northeast, this is central both to my spiritual practice, but it becomes the food, the nourishment of my liberation, both spiritually, relationally, and socially. My practice of ultimate liberation is both a unique expression of myself, but because I come into contact with others, it cannot but have impact on other people. And I know this. And so this question about how Black liberation struggle is not only connected to liberation of Black bodies, but all bodies, is definitely tied to what Rod was speaking about earlier, which is Freire talks about this interconnectedness between the oppressor and the oppression, the oppressor and the oppressed. You know, it's dialogical, you know, that they both are engaged in this problem of suffering. And so when one becomes free, the other one has the option to continue to be entangled with that suffering or to do their work. There was a conversation that Toni Morrison and Angela Davis had in the New York Public Library and it's called Connecting for Progress, and where Toni Morrison spoke about the cost of those who commit violence, those who carry out violence, is not ever really considered when we think about liberation. You know, I think that when we're talking about Black liberation being freeing all, in some ways it's also the exposing of which that those who commit violence, racialized violence or otherwise violence, are also entangled and suffering deeply. And it's a suffering that they too, like all of us, have to take the responsibility to liberate themselves from. In my own practice, I think that I took on my spiritual practice as a way to deal with both systemic, but what I call relational racism. I think the goal of any kind of racism, systemic or otherwise, is to dehumanize Black bodies and not to make them connected with their sources. And so for me, to engage in my spiritual practices, whether it be with my ancestors or through my yoga or through my meditation or chanting, or whatever other sources of refuge I have, not only get me closer to what I want, but surround me in that love, which is that liberation. For me, my spiritual practice is also beyond just kind of tending to the wounds that racism has on my heart, on my soul. But for me, it's a kind of vaccine. It allows me to, in some ways, fight the virus of systemic racism, so it doesn't attack my body and I don't become the host. This is so I can see clearly and directly, that I can make choice of how and if I'm going to relate to systems or peoples or structures or worldviews that are based in anti-Black racism in particular. And then I have the agency to invest in practices and peoples and structures and places that invest in what I call my spiritual sovereignty. And that is the antithesis of what racism is doing against my body. And finally, I just want to say a little bit about social activism and spiritual practice and the way they inform each other for me. For me, I can't have one without the other. And sometimes my spiritual practice is my social activism. As a person who practices two Indigenous practices, some of which are heavily legislated in these lands or in others, to be able to practice the way in which I practice my offerings and my devotion publicly or freely is a way of a kind of social activism. At the core of my activism really is holding space for those who hold the space. Because I think that if we don't have that space of care, we're not gonna know that sense and that feeling of what it's like to be free. I could say more, but I that's all I prepared right now.
Okay. Thank you, Sister Sadana. I have questions, but I'll save them for the group. Yeah, I'll save them for the group. Thank you so much for that sharing. And I will like to invite Baba Devi up next to share. Okay, Baba Devi.
Namaste, everyone. I'm very grateful and excited to be here. And I want to say that it's an event like this that I think encapsulates so much of what we're asking about and what we're talking about tonight. This coming together, right? This connecting and giving birth to something new, and that can live on and be nurtured, you know, until that. Um, so in talking about what liberation is, um, for me, it is to be unbound, to really be free, right? And to be uninhibited, and uncovered, right? And there's a vulnerability in that, but the freedom to move and to shift and to become fully who I am, right? Without the um, well, more so about coming into a sense of moreness, right? A sense of completion. And for me, I've always been a fairly spiritual being, right? It's common these days, but I've always been a little more comfortable being beyond my body. And in most of the spaces that I've encountered and inhabited in my life, I could, it was more about fitting in and being a part of something, right? But I hadn't quite learned yet um, to bring my fullness into it. And as someone who I have cerebral palsy, and so with that physical disability, coming into a space of yoga and spiritual practice can also be sort of othering, right? And so what I had learned to do is to excel at being other by coming into that space that belonged to that everyman, that everyone space, and that every man space um, often excluded the state of my physical body. It was something that I moved beyond, or excluded the fact that I am a Black woman, because I was everyone. I was a part of that everyone space. And as I have matured into my practice, 20 plus years of studying with Ma Jaya Bhagavati at Kashi and Swami Jayadevi, and within our spiritual community, again and again and again, I've been called forward to truly inhabit my body. And if I inhabit my body, if I can be here, that it means something for me to be a Black woman in a yoga class, a Black woman teaching, to let myself not only be present, but also engaged as a Black woman, not just as a yogi and not just as a spiritual person. That, there's this idea that we take body, we take form to gain our liberation. And so I to honor who I am, to honor the fullness of that, is yet another step in that process. And it is about me coming and honoring my body, and honoring that I've come more fully into the spirit, into the soul of who I am. With some exception, right? If you see me, one of the first things you'll see is that I'm a Black woman. So if I can use that, if I can engage from that space and be empowered from that space, the change that I can make, that any of us can make when we fully inhabit who we are, is exponential. And so for me, I fairly recently have really come into an on purpose space of letting my Blackness, letting my heritage, letting that which is in me, in my DNA, come forward, not just in my spiritual DNA, but in my physical DNA, come forward and be present and accounted for and voiced into the space. And it goes back to for me, in a lot of ways, here at Kashi, we are interfaith, but one of our primary deities is Kali. And Kali is the black goddess of liberation and transformation, who loves so compassionately, so fiercely, that she consumes the ego, right? And that is my lineage. That when I think of Kali as my ancestor, as I think of Kali as part of my DNA, it changes how I interact in the world, and it magnifies the ways that I can serve. And Ma would often say, she would say that her teacher asked her whether she wanted to read the scriptures or to live the scriptures, study the scriptures. And there's something about living them, about embodying them, that calls forth a devotion that feeds me in a way that I hardly have words for, right? That yes, there is the anger, and yes, there is the power, but there's something about devotion and that love for the moment, the love that is inherent, right? That is real and actual, that makes all the difference. And it is that kind of fierce love, I think, that is called for when we are working to bridge those spaces between who we are and who we can be, right? That fullness of making deep, profound change in the world. And there is a vulnerability and an integrity that I think is called forth in that. And so if I am to live that, if I'm to live the scriptures, if I am to be the embodiment of my liberation, then that means I have to show up in that fullness. And in that fullness, there comes this overflow, right? Not so much from access, because it just continues. That overflow comes to where all beings are touched by that light, by that love, by that work, by that practice. If I'm not making myself less, I can see someone else in their fullness, right? Where I'm grounded and where I'm sourced for changes. And to me, for me to be able to change, I think in a moment, is possibility. And possibility, the ability to make a different choice on an individual and on a systemic level, to know that you have the option to do it differently, that it doesn't always have to be the way it's always been, right? That the fissures that form when we break a habit, the habit of unworthiness, the habit of undirected, unchecked rage, the habit of hopelessness. When we begin to break those habits, I think with hope and integrity and devotion, it creates a new space. It creates a new possibility for us to move into. And that kind of change is cumulative, is exponential, and it can start to reshape and dismantle systems that no longer serve us. Because the heart is the heart. And it's not, when I say that, I say it from a space of empowerment, right? I say it as a woman who knows what it is to be loved powerfully. And there's nothing weak about that, right? And so how in moving forward in that, the struggle is the struggle, right? And we gather tools, the tools of our breath, the tools of our awareness, the tools of our community, or tools of our coming together to make a difference. There's a lot been said lately, right, about how we are in this together. And I would say it is beautiful to know that we are together. It is even more powerful to acknowledge and make room for and move in a space knowing that we are all connected and that connection matters. And it is from this space that I believe, that I trust, right, that we can really become free and make a different world.
Okay. Hey, thank you, Baba Devi. And so I'll introduce Shane now to offer reflections.
Yes, thank you, Lama Ra, for holding this space for us. Um, I was I was wishing I could have finished hearing Baba Davi's powerful words. And thank you for sharing, Sadada. That was amazing. And I can't wait to dig into your work further. I'm so glad to be brought here together with these powerful people speaking about Blackness in this space, in front of my beloved teacher, Swami Jaya Devi. And thank you, Lama Ra, for inviting the mother in. And as Lama Ra said, I may not have met Ma Jaya in the flesh. She is always with me. As we do this work of liberation, I am a descendant of enslaved humans on this land. I am very deeply grounded in that knowledge. I lost my Africanness once I and my family were brought here as a bill of sale. I recognize that, I know I just descend from Africa at some point, but my last name is Roberts. My grandmother's last name is Brown. My grandfather's name is oh, am I not on? Oh. Okay, I'm on. All right. So what what I was saying before, I don't know if you all heard everything I said, but I was giving thanks for this platform. I really am inspired by Bava Devi, by her story that she just relayed. And I was saying that I really want to dig into Siddhartha's work. And I am just so grateful to be here in front of my Kashi family, my beloved Swami. And I also I'm so glad that Lama Rod invited the mother in. I was just saying that that Majai is with me. I know she is with me as we work towards liberation. And what I was saying was, if you guys didn't hear me, but I was saying that I'm a descendant of enslaved humans here on this American soil. I lost my Africanness once my ancestors made that journey and arrived here as a bill of sale. I always ground myself in that knowledge that, in the fact that that we have arrived here at this place where we have a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of digging through the mounds of myths which we hold on to so tight, instead of the reality which yoga asks us to bring to the mat, that curiosity to know what's behind what we might not know or fear. I am very involved in organizing and some of the things, and doing our workshops and on race and yoga. And one of the things that we encounter a lot is the lack of knowledge of self, and to be grounded in our Blackness and knowing that there are different entry points for Blackness, that Blackness before 1965 was almost exclusively reserved for descendants of enslavement and Jim Crow. And now it has been this ideology of race continues to spread through the world, so much like the virus that we are all dealing with COVID-19, to where now people are starting to call our African brothers and sisters Black. And it continues to separate us. It continues to entrench us in this myth that I am Black, right? There's no biological basis for my Blackness. It was a way to justify the crime of slavery, to make me a slave. Because if I was Black, then I was not human. Then all of the injustices, the brutality of all of what we call now white supremacy can now be justified and legalized, which is what Martin Luther King so eloquently pulled together when he said that we have to fight militarism, imperialism, and racism at the same time, because those are all the offshoots. And that is why we at Red Clay Yoga, and how Chelsea and Jayadasi and I work to center race, because race is the way that America became what it is now. And we will not be liberated until we repair the descendants of that nightmare of the American dream. That my family who have been here, I've recently mapped out my family tree, and I've been doing it for the last 3 years. And we've been here since the 1700s. And some of that work has been deeply troubling to me, because it is so hard to identify my ancestors who were enslaved. But what the hardest part has been is to see that my light skin was not the product of a love story, was not the product of a coming together of suffering to move from one place to another, which we call love. It was that my light skin on all sides of my family was that of a slave owner. And so that's why when we talk about liberation and when we talk about race, that we have to really understand that here in these United States, that we've been forging a new identity from day one, that we've been here together from 1619. This is our 401st year of being here together. Yet Black people, that those first Africans were not recognized as being vital parts of this project that we eventually call the United States of America. And that our liberation is based upon one another. That we need our white brothers and sisters to be able to understand that Lincoln did not reform the slave catchers and the overseers to get rid of the institution of slavery. And today, the same thing is equally true. That we will not get rid of white supremacy. We will not get rid of racism by reforming the police. They are a symptom of our system that we have now highlighted where the virus is and what this particular part and how this particular part of this virus we call race operates. But we needed a Union Army to march onto the South to liberate the slaves. And as we move forward, we have to, as Baba Devi said, that we have to move in a way on top of our ancestors, Martin Luther King and Gandhi, who showed us the way of what a true revolution now looks like. Because violence always begets violence, no matter how righteous my cause or any of our Black brothers and sisters, our trans brothers and sisters, our people who are out in the streets right now. No matter how righteous our cause is, violence will always beget violence. You will always have somebody who whose family member, whose friend, whose loved one will be gone because of that violence. And Martin Luther King and Gandhi showed us what a nonviolent revolution and how to win in that revolution. And we stopped it in 1968 here in the United States. And he won. I always want to remind the youth that we work with that we won the rights. What my grandmother lived, older than I am right now, she was 44 when the Voting Rights Act passed, so that she could vote in Hope, Arkansas without polling taxes and literacy tests. And so as I finish, I really want we all to know, for us to understand that that's what yoga has brought us. We really stand with what Gandhi, who used a lot of yogic principles to move from being a card-carrying racist in South Africa to understanding what the nature of what race means, what power over means, to move into a satyagraha that moved him into understanding how to resist the empire that was being set up, the caste that was being rigidly set for India, and how Martin Luther King used that same principle to understand what the caste of Blackness is here. And that we have to use those principles and now bring them into this new century. What a wonderful time to be alive. And to revolutionize how we look at nonviolent struggle, because that is the only way. And I'm so blessed to have studied under Swami Jayadevi, Ma Jaya, to understand how I could use my voice, my Blackness, to move us forward so that we liberate everyone on this land. Thank you.
For that blessing.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we will, well, first we'll do just to check in, just where are you at? Where's your breath? Where's your seat? Are you staying connected to your benefactors, your circle of care around you? Are you connected to the earth? I wonder if you can reconnect to your gratitude as well. Just staying with everything that's arising for us. Listening, hearing, holding space for everything. Okay, so we would like to ask Rashid to come now and offer reflection as well.
Peace, everybody. I'm Rashid, and I first just want to give honor to Lama Rod for inviting me to be a part of this panel. Really grateful for that invitation, so thank you, Lama Rod. Also, a deep bow to all of the wonderful panelists that presented and spoke before me. I'm looking forward to getting to know you all more intimately. And lastly, I just want to acknowledge the land that I have the privilege of living on, the land of the Piscataway people. And today we call this place Washington, D.C. Yeah, so when we talk about freedom and liberation, what immediately comes to mind for me is simply honesty. And when I say honesty, I'm not referring to, sharing what's on my mind or just speaking out whatever's on my heart. But when I say honesty, I really mean a deep connection and intimacy with what's alive for me in my heart, in my body, and in my mind. And this practice actually began for me when Lama Rod began to read the panelists' names and their bios. And for me, the practice of meeting each moment and making room for what's present started then, because I noticed within my own mind thoughts of comparison, and also just in my heart feelings of being inferior after hearing all of the panelists, their certifications and where they studied and their credentials and all of these things. And for me, what our spiritual practices do and what my spiritual practice does for me, it allows me to make note of that, to feel that in my body, to remain close with it, and to make space for it so that I don't attempt to bypass it. And that's really what freedom is for me. It's the space and the ability to turn towards, to lean into the discomfort of the present moment, and to actually feel what it feels like to be vulnerable without allowing the vulnerability to actually consume my ability to be present and aware. And also I begin to think about, since we're talking about spirituality and freedom and liberation from systematic oppression, I'm wondering, and this is something that I have to do for myself, I'm really wondering how much of the comparing mind, the judgment, and feelings of feeling inferior to the other panelists had to do with me being socially conditioned in a society that values credentials and achievements over one's ability to be compassionate. And for what the spiritual practice encourages me to do is to actually really sit with that and remain close to that and not push that away, but to honor that. And that's my responsibility. So when I think of freedom, I'm also thinking about responsibility. It doesn't mean that I hold and I become familiar with discomfort and just leave it there, but I'm actually responsible for looking at it and learning from it so that I won't perpetuate the conditioning even further. Yeah, so freedom, it's also gives me the ability to acknowledge, that I'm actually in process. And when I say in process, I'm really meaning that, I have to be able to acknowledge that even though I'm a teacher, I still have insecurities. And that's a process, and I have to continue to open that and meet that. And as a teacher, I have, I still have harmful patterns and tendencies that I have to continue to confront and to hold. And with the practice of liberation also makes room for, being able to hold the tension of being human. This is what the practice does for me. It says, you can still be a teacher, and all of those other things can be true as well. You don't have to select one over the other, to push one aside. So it's about freedom. It's about living with tension and not being consumed by the tension. And then when I'm close to my tension, when I'm close to my pain, when I'm close to my suffering, then it's less likely that I will do harm to others, because I will be sensitive to their complexities as another human being. So I guess liberation is about honoring the complexity of the moment, honoring the complexity of all of our identities, our locations, our intersectionalities, bringing all of that close to us, and allowing whatever our spiritual practice is to be able to hold all of that lightly, but with fierce compassion simultaneously. And then this prevents me from being in conflict with my moment, with the moment. So when I think about, spiritual practice and disrupting systems of oppression, what really comes to mind for me is really, creating new spaces, not in response to whiteness, not reacting to what's happening in the world, but creating new spaces that's in alignment with my Blackness and with our Blackness. And for me currently, that means really investing time and energy in creating spaces that support intentionally celebrating, uplifting the lives of Black people, Blackness, uplifting our stories, having other opportunities to hear other stories, to hear how Black folks have been impacted by systematic racism and other isms, and really allowing our intersections to be from where the ground of our spiritual practice comes from. So it's really about not knowing, but really just developing opportunities for Black folk to gather and to bring the hurt, but also to bring the joy and to bring the resilience. And when we share our stories and when we work with it all, then something new can arise that's spontaneous and creative. So this practice of, when we talk about awareness, a lot of the practices also just bearing witness to what's here and holding it, and also being able to recreate the narrative from that place. And in those spaces, I think we can disrupt systematic oppression within us, within our own minds and hearts, with the help of community. And in those places, I'm really hopeful that we can begin to regain a sense of agency over our own lives, over our own minds, over our own narratives, and our identities. And when we do that, I think we can begin to continue our path to liberation and healing. So just speaking about social activism briefly, and when I think of social activism, I really don't have a lot of answers to share about it. But what I do is I have a question that I constantly inquire into. And that question is, what can I offer in this moment of history that comes from my own experience of freedom and out of my own internal work with my heart? What can I offer in this moment, not in response to whiteness, not because I'm adjusting to whiteness, not because I'm attempting to assimilate or adapt to whiteness, but truly from this radical honesty, truly from being in community with people, with Black people. What can I bring forth from this place? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that beautiful sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I want you to stay on screen. I'm gonna put you on the spot, but everyone's gonna do this. but since you're here, I'm going to start with you.
All right.
Before I get to the question I want to ask the panelists, so go ahead and start, asking questions in the question box at the bottom of the screen, and we're just going to go through as many questions as we can tonight. We're going to go just a little longer than we originally intended because we got started a little late, so we may go to about 8:40. Just to make up for a little bit of time. So I'm going to ask this question, and this question is coming from many conversations that I've been having with Black folks, since, really since the murder of George Floyd, and and then the reemergence of the movement. And so so a lot of Black folks I've been talking with, friends, associates, colleagues, we've been getting a lot of messages and texts and emails from white people, just checking in. And people I haven't even heard from in years. They're like, Rod, what are you doing? What's going on? What's happening? And that can be quite overwhelming, to be asked to check in with someone around what for many of us is actually the arising of a lot of trauma. This movement, it takes a certain energetic toll, on people of African descent. This isn't just a release that feels good. This is a rehearsing and a re-movement through a lot of heartbreak, a lot of hopelessness, a lot of despair, a lot of transhistorical trauma gets stirred up, And maybe the last thing I want to do is check in with white people.
Right.
Yeah. So here's the question. Here's the question that I think is really important for us to talk about as a panel. And we're going to start with you, Rashid.
Okay.
What do you need? What do you need? And this I'll give you a little bit of context. What do you need from yourself? What do you need from your spiritual community? What do you need from the world? What do you need from your practice? I mean, you can take this anywhere, but what do you need? This is the question I want to offer you as a gift.
Yeah. So for me, when I think about, what I need, I need the choice to say, right now I'm choosing not to engage because I need to rest. And, going back to the text messages and the calls from white people, and, it's a real thing.
Yeah.
And, I was having a conversation with some white people earlier this week, and, one thing that I communicated to them was, if we don't have a ongoing relationship, when you check in with me, when a Black person didn't just get murdered, it feels like I'm the object of your meditation practice. If a Black person gets killed, then I hear from you, and it actually can also feel like they're being very selfish, because it's actually more about them in the moment rather than recognizing that they actually haven't built the relationship there to actually ask me to open up something that can be very traumatic for me in the moment. So I think it's just really, and we're not talking about white people who I have relationships with, who I talk to ongoingly. But it can feel like it's a lot of extra energy to just let Black folks know that they care. Yeah. So I would say what I need is, the space not to feel ashamed or guilty, to say I'll ignore that, I'll set that aside, and I'm gonna choose to rest and do what's important for me in this moment.
Yeah, that's so important to articulate.
Yeah.
Just to say, the most liberating thing that I think you can ask someone is like, what do you need? And if you're someone asking that, the thing that we have to do is hold space for an answer that we may not want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because maybe what I need is for you to go away.
Exactly.
You know, right? Or for you to stop calling me, or just for you to give me space. Or maybe what I need is for you to stop making my struggle about you.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Exactly.
you know, yeah, yeah. Thank you for
Yeah.
that. You know,
Thank you.
I just want to ask everyone this. So let's go back to Sadada. We'll start from the top and come back through, and then we'll go into the questions that folks are asking in the box. Okay. So Sadada girl, get ready. Put your top on. And as we're waiting for Sadada, there you are. As we're waiting again, check in with yourself. Check in. Where are you? Where's the seed? Where's the earth? Where's the mother? You know, don't keep your sources of refuge close as we're moving deeper into this. Okay. So when I move into really challenging conversations or situations, like the mother is just like the breath. It's a second thought. Like she's there. She's right there. You know, I don't have to reach out and get her because she's right here. All right, Sister Sadada, Sister Legend. So I offer you the same question. You know, we've talked about this before.
Yes.
You know, but what do you need?
I have to admit, I don't get a lot of those calls. I think if people know me, you know why. I do need white people to do their work.
Yeah.
I appreciated what Rashid had to say. Like I appreciate the reaching out from white people who I have relationship with. White people that are really struggling to peel back their own whiteness, you know, to be responsible for their privilege and their place in a structure that gives them more access to just basic care in other ways. Mm-hmm. I think right now I need to be cared for. Mm-hmm. And I need to be cared for by people who are or want to be resourced, yeah, and are or want to be realized. Mm-hmm. And that becomes the foundation from where that care is coming from. Mm-hmm. You know, not like what Rashid said, like I'm not the object of your care. Yeah, I think there's a kind of lack of regard for one's humanity when you just reach out, when something is wrong. Yeah. And you don't reach in and ask yourself, where have I been wrong in this kind of situation? I think everyone can be messy, but it causes a mess. It causes a kind of mess. And that kind of mess, I think, creates a particular kind of stain in these times. Yeah. It's like we're dealing with the delicate fabric of our kind of karmic souls right now. And none of us can really fuck this up right now.
And, you know, we're going to call Baba Devi up next. But before we do that, so Baba Devi, get ready. But before we do that, you know, just something that I want to feed back that I think you hinted to, which was like the role of self-care and really trying to manage, you know, the ways in which people attempt to help you who actually aren't resourced enough to help you. Or they think they're trying to help you, but they're actually trying to alleviate their own discomfort.
Absolutely.
You
And
know?
it's kind of like an insatiability,
Yeah.
you know?
Mhm.
You know, it feels insatiating
Yeah.
when somebody who's not resourced to help
Yeah.
is trying to help.
Yeah.
And that's what I think of, like the work is. It's like to know where your edges are.
Mhm.
And to say, I cannot help. I
Mhm.
need to retreat.
Mhm.
Or I can only help in this way. I think there's a way in which that, like, even when we think about the self, especially as Black body people, you know, I mean, some of that projection of selfishness is directly from capitalism. That, like, you shouldn't have a self. Your body is a tool for
Yeah.
capitalism to benefit.
Yeah.
You know? And you know, like the Lord says, this is about self-preservation.
Yes.
This is not like care. This is not like an option.
Mhm. 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 The ways in which capitalism has rendered the Black body like as something that can be used as a tool, like the Black body is a tool. And that's the trauma, maybe the experience.
And then it becomes the unworthiness
Yeah.
of the care,
Yeah.
the love, of the preserving.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fight then becomes about, you know, kind of getting crumbs of humanity and not cleaving to the soul of it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what care is for me. That's what having a boundary is for me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Listen, I'm gonna have to let you go because this will turn into an hour-long conversation, and we'll continue over the phone tonight.
We will.
So we'll bring in Baba Devi. Yeah.
Namaste.
Namaste, Baba Devi. And I offer you the same question, Baba Devi. What do you need?
Rest.
Mm.
Deep, profound rest.
Yeah.
And and that's something, that's one important thing. I also want to say that, because we live in the world we live in, it's easy to say, one of the things you said earlier is that the movement has reemerged.
Yeah.
And I push back on that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't reemerged. Mm-hmm. It's just that the camera is on it again.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Work is continuous.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And one of my biggest fears around all of this is that we're going to forget again that this is continuous work.
Yeah.
That it's a living, breathing, talk about living the scriptures, talk about living our liberation. This is an opportunity to do that, to live it and embody it. Yeah. So I want to say that, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. In terms of what I need from people around me, from white people, from all people, I mean, honestly, is integrity. Yeah. Integrity to know what your work is, to honor and lead me to my work, to walk with me through this as best we can together, not to carry me. And I am one of the most pampered people on the planet. You know this.
I know.
You know, I am one of the most pampered people on the planet. So I like that. Right? Well, let's keep that coming. But also just to walk with me, right? And to not put, one of the things that I have experienced is that I've been getting, I can tell people are trying to give me space, right? Because, I don't know if I look like ticking time bomb or just crazy. I don't know what, I don't know what it looks like, right? But there's this a little bit of this space that I'm getting that it feels like it's not born of, doesn't always feel like it's honoring where I'm at. Yeah. It feels more like fear and not knowing how to, being uncertain.
Yeah.
And I think it's something about being, I don't know how to put this otherwise, but there's a skill to being able to be in a space, to be in a place, to be present with someone without having to put your hands all over them. Like, it's not about fixing, right? It's about being with and witnessing and walking with. And I think because, and because we're all such nice people, like we want to be nice, there's a certain level of discomfort with just being with someone who's in their pain, and it's different. I mean, when it's physical, it can be a little different, but when it's that deep soul, samskara pain, people don't always know how to be with that. And so to be able to have enough integrity, to have enough awareness, to have enough love and worthiness to stand with me and any other person of color who's walking through this, right? And to not be a hindrance. And it's about all of us. It's not about you. It's not your thing, right? It's not my thing. It's, but the realness of what that usness is, not the usness and togetherness that paints over and bypasses. But it says, I see you in the fullness of who you are, and I'm showing up for you in the fullness of who I am, and we're going to move through this together. That's what I think. Ally is not the word. That's what it is to be satsang. I want my satsang to be satsang with me in this. Right? That's what I want.
I mean, that's it. That's the community. Like, we need community. We need our communities to be together, to be with us. Not to take the exit door out when it gets too rough, or when my pain gets too real for you. But to actually come closer to me, honoring my boundaries.
Right. Yes.
Like, you can be close, but you don't have to put your hands on me.
In so many ways, and all the ways that means.
Yeah. Because maybe one of the most hurtful things that we experience is when people pretend to show up for us, but they make it about them.
Yes.
And then you don't feel seen.
Right. And then you got two people to take care of. There's the one that was in the room. Right? And it's hard to not fall into that habit.
Yeah. And it comes from people not doing their work. Not, people are trying to always reach out, but they're not reaching in. And I think that maybe one of the things that Ma taught was how to reach in order to reach out.
Breathe out in. Yeah.
Yes. And when you said rest, I just wanted to quit. I wanted to actually lie down. Because I was just thinking about, so my family, like my aunt and my mom, they have this painting. You've probably seen this before. The painting is a Black woman getting out of bed. And her sitting on the edge of the bed, just like with her head down.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah.
And like for years, my aunt had that for years, and my mom just got it. But my aunt would have that for years in her bedroom. And I would look at it and I was like, God, that's what being Black is. Even as a young child, I was like that tiredness, that fatigue, that like having to like push against the world, And I just even I've been thinking about that the past few days, and just like the ways in which, like, at the end of the day, I just like need a break.
Yes. And one of the things that I've had to surrender to, and there's so many people learning with me through this, is that productivity, that my wellness cannot be sacrificed to productivity. I may not be as efficient,
right,
but I will be much less broken.
Yeah.
So if I do 2 things as opposed to 6, that makes a difference. And so for me to even have that conversation with myself is a challenge, right? of like, you know, what do you actually have resources for, and still feeling useful and engaged and feel like I'm doing my work, right? So having to reevaluate and redefine what work is for me too has been a product of this time, right? And there's what we've been calling the silver lining of, you know, being on stay-at-home orders and the world kind of being slowed down a little bit has given us the space to explore this, or given me the space to explore this in a way that I might have outran with my busyness, you know, this time last year. So, you know, it's all of that. And you know, and I can't, you know, it's hard to leave any part of this behind, you know, back to satsang. You know, if I leave any of that behind, if I don't want to see it, and there are some days where I'm just like, nope, right? But get back. A reason why I re-engage, because if I don't do that, I'll be leaving pieces of my heart behind, and I mean that in the sense of the bigger heart, right? And I think that's essential to it, and that's what community is. It's not just hands; it's hearts.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much, Baba Devi. We're gonna call Shane up. We're gonna call Shane up in just a second, but I just want to say this. I just want to offer appreciation to Baba Devi for just reminding me that the movement is always happening. You know, it's just like sometimes we just turn our attention away, but like there's still people, you know, every day, you know, and we're part of that movement every day. We just don't link our work to the greater collective, you know, but every day that we get up and move into the world with compassion and open heart, we're in the movements, you know. So I just want to thank you for reminding me of that as well. You know, that's what our elders are for.
I'm 51.
It's older than me.
Twice as cute.
Oh my God. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll call Shane up next. Shane, we'll ask you to come back now. And we'll probably just get to one question in the question box as well. So before our time is up. But all right, welcome back, Shane. Welcome back. And so I offer you the same question as well. What do you need?
What do I what?
What do you need?
Need?
Yeah, need.
Reparations. I mean, that is it right there. There's nothing else that my family, your family, anybody who has been on this land, which we have acknowledged was, you know, stolen, is reparations for us to be repaired. That's why we come to the mat every day. It's a new beginning, but we can't come to the mat with what our preconceived notions of what is going to happen on that mat. And one of the things that I see that, you know, stops us from these tough conversations is, so I've heard so many times that white people will say, oh, I don't know what to say. I'm so scared to mess up, you know, and you don't know if you're going to mess up. How do you know until you get on that mat? Till you get into easy pose, or you put your back against the wall, or sit in your chair and take that journey towards that inner peace that you can then move and take that suffering. James Baldwin, I always go and go back to what he said, what love was to him was, you know, to use my suffering with your suffering, Lama Rod, and take that and use that to move from one place to another. And that is where I see how our spiritual practice can go from just being, oh, I'm going to work on my intrapsychic space, and then I'm going to wait until I get that right, until I move out into the world. And it has to happen. Your political awareness has to happen with your yoga. And that's what I see. And white people, I love to always, we have our time at home, as Baba Davis said, to slow it down just a little bit. And there's a wonderful movie on Netflix called Gangs of New York. And I always love to tell white people, before you became white, you were Irish, you were Jewish, you were Russian, you were some European ancestor who said, I'm gonna make the choice to travel across the pond and figure out a new life here, a new beginning, to repair what may have happened to me in Europe. And that is the unknown, that curiosity that Swami told us when we were on our first day of YTT, it's that curiosity that's going to let you come back here tomorrow. And to understand that, those European immigrants had a Marshall Plan. That Marshall Plan made Bank of Italy become Bank of America. And when we play in capitalism, you need capital. And I'm not a capitalist, but if we're going to play the game right now, we need to be prepared first before we start moving into alternative ways of looking at the economy. And, and even when we look at, our dear brothers in Cuba, they went through a wonderful socialist revolution that the Black Panthers saw was very needed in a very fascist, racist state that Cuba was in. But it still did not cure race. The same racial issues popped right back up to where Raul Castro had to come out a few years ago and say, hey, we've messed up again. And so we need to be prepared so that we can start not romanticizing others, the other, and understanding that Africans, those 54 beautiful countries, are not either the noble savage or the crazed savage. That they were human just like Europeans. They had dictators, they had rapists, they had lovers. And we have to understand that this is a human project that we are always involved in. As Baba Devi told us again, that the work has never stopped. Because we are all still here. Because we only have one planet as we know of right now. And we are either going to survive here together or we going to die here together. And I have that hope. That's what brings me to the mat every day to say, you know what, I'm going to work on myself as I continue to move into this world for liberation.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I have one follow-up question, and then after that we'll just get to another question. But this word of reparations, it scares people. And I wonder, when I'm having these conversations with white folks, and even when I have these conversations with non-Black people of color, this is a tough word.
Yes.
It's right up there with defunding the police.
Right.
So I guess my question is like, how, if you're not Black, okay, so if you're POC, non-Black POC or white identified, how do you get involved with reparations? Like, what's a way to get started in this process of reparations?
Yeah, I think it's by ground. I think it's the grounding is, I love yoga so much. And I'm so grateful that Jaya Dasi brought me to yoga, because we always skip that root chakra, that first place where we have to do the real work of identity, right? Of knowing, do we have a stable place to move towards what we want in Samadhi, right? And so one of the things I love to ask my white countrymen is, does that Black person have a stable place to practice yoga? And that stable place that's usually a no, because there's study after study that comes out, even the richest of our Black brothers and sisters here have issues with dying of heart disease, of cancer, of not being believed. Serena Williams, one of the most popular athletes, when she had her baby, she was not believed that she was going through that pain because her Black body must not. We've seen her, go through the pain of a tennis tournament, so she can't be in this much pain delivering this baby. And so we have to understand and be real with why we're having these conversations of understanding that white supremacy is replicated violently and non-violently.
Yeah.
All of the institutions which we hold to be so sacred, the family, the church, and school. It is taught every day, all the time. Your silence, your saying that, I'm still going to work on Martin Luther King holiday, that I am going to recognize July 4th and make an Instagram post about how we've all been free since July 4th. And all of those ways in which we don't push back on understanding our history, that we've been here together. And the only reason that Ma Jaya was able to, one of the only reasons that our beloved teacher was able to form Kashi is that she may not have had the wealth that she came from in New York, but that social network opened her up very quickly to be able to form and understand how to move as a white woman in these United States, to move her cause that she felt deeply into, to have the support. Kashi Atlanta, I love talking to the people when I was going through teacher training to understand what they did outside, and so many of them were gainfully employed, or if they were poor or had fallen on hard times, that their family was only waiting for them to find a practice, to find Jaya Devi, to find Ma, so that they could be reintroduced into the larger white wealth that built this country. And that is why we have to understand the hardest thing that white people in the generality have is that, what if Kashi may not exist for my liberation? And so when you have to hear that, that is when it stops and goes, ooh, no, look, I'm with you all the way up until I have to lose something. And that is why we started the Civil War, because there was a half this country said, I will fight you to keep my asset, the most valuable asset in America, which was my ancestors' Black bodies.
Yeah.
More than the land, more than the factories, it was our Black bodies that was the engine, who were the engine of this country. And so that is why that conversation dies really quickly all the time, because you have to acknowledge, I have to give up something, and something may not be here for me for that Black liberation.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I keep having these like visions of like prophets, and like, I keep going back to the Black Power movement, and like the rhetoric and the power and the energy and the clarity about like, like what is needed. So yeah, thank you, Fred. Thank you to everyone.
Thank you.
So we're on borrowed time now. So I just want to look through just the questions here, and let me see. A person, blah, blah, blah. I wonder if there is a question from the panelists, if there's a question that someone wants to ask the panel themselves, and if you do have a question, if you can just kind of raise your hands, and maybe we can invite you to come back on to ask that question, or you can text me as well, if you have a question. But I think it would be really interesting just to kind of close the evening with a question that someone has for the panel themselves. So does anyone have a question? If there is not a question, there is a question here. I think it will be good to kind of close up for today. It happens to be a question that I may have written a book about. And so I think this is really important, actually. I think this is a very important question. So it's the question for everyone. I'm going to jump off camera and let everyone just come up together and do this question. But the question is, how do you control your anger on this topic? So how do you control your anger on this topic? Let's bring Rashid back, and then we'll just go back and get Sadada, and we'll get Baba Devi, but let's have just as many people on the screen as possible to support each other, okay? So let's bring Rashid up, and then Shane, why don't you start as Rashid comes up and joins you?
Okay. Control my anger. I move through my anger. Again, James Baldwin said to be a relatively conscious Negro in America is to be enraged all the time. And I have never not known what it is to not be enraged. But I move through it. I recognize it. I don't let it, I don't stop it from coming, right? And then as human beings, to me, the goal of me as a self-identified man, Black man, is to grow up, not to be Black, not to be a man, is to grow up. And that means to be able to take in all of my emotions. Mm-hmm. And, I do a lot of work with teens and kids. And, that's another revolution we're going to have to work through at one point, is how to liberate children, right? And that's one thing that binds us all, adults. At one point, we were all children. We understood what it was to have our anger not reflected. Yeah. And so I just really want, to know, like, it's good to be angry, but it's also good to know where that anger, where that place is coming from and why you're angry. And then to move through that with compassion, with your tools that you learn through yoga and meditation. And, so that you can move that anger into action.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Radical Dharma. That is a radical, that is radical Dharma.
Yep. Absolutely. Let's bring Rashid up. Rashid, let's get Rashid's reflection on this as well. Yeah. Because there is this thing, really related to Blackness and anger, Blackness and rage, and I think often my experiences of growing up is really the anger consumes.
Mm-hmm.
The anger is coming from the trauma.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like you said, your grandmother. My grandmother, I didn't know a time when she wasn't really kind of just had a little anger in her. But she showed us grace,
Mm-hmm.
which was the other side of that anger. That she knew that she couldn't not show us what hope looked like.
Mm-hmm.
She couldn't say that she was hopeless.
Yeah.
But that's what I look at.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have to hold space for that.
Mm-hmm.
To hold space for that. So Rashid is going to come up in a second. Looks like we're having a little bit of technical issues. Yeah, the platform has been a little glitchy today. This is why we started a little late. But we'll just hold tight for just a second. We're working it out. Is anyone else ready to come up? Siddhartha or Baba Devi again? And as we're waiting too, we're going to move right into the soak afterwards as well. So we'll definitely be wrapping up around 10, so our soak, our Gana Chakra practice is not going to be that long. So Siddhartha is ready as well to come up. Yeah. Yeah, it looks like we're having a little bit of technical issue because everyone's ready. Oh, there we go. Oh, Siddhartha, look at that. All right. Same question for you, Siddhartha. How do you work with that anger?
I think similar to Shane, but I guess for me, anger is always an indication that there's a need that I need to meet first. I think that, and it's obvious, it's also an indication that there is some sort of projected need from somebody else onto me. And so I think if I get engaged in my anger and act out or respond or cut up, what I'm doing, figuratively, what I'm doing is I'm getting entangled in somebody else's stuff, karma, their story about me or about life.
Yeah.
So, in particular, as it relates to racism, I think I just go right to my heart and I just say, like, how are you feeling? And 9 times out of 10, it's some kind of hurt. And I initially will remove myself, and it doesn't need to be. Oh, I think I'm off. I'm here. Oh, okay.
You're on.
It doesn't need to be physically. It can actually just be emotionally. That's that experience of space.
Yeah.
I just kind of put space around the object and the stimulus. So the object is like this, something that's arising in me.
Yeah.
And then I ask myself, can I resource myself and still stay engaged in this? And if I can't, I go.
Yeah.
And if I can't do it in a way that's skillful, or at least without creating any undue harm. So, yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Let's bring Baba Devi up. And I can be taken off too, so don't worry. I can disappear. Oh.
Love it.
Oh, baby.
Beautiful screen, isn't it?
It is.
Oh, anger, right? I've shifted a little bit from that idea of control to mastery. So for me, the question becomes, how can I master the anger? And for me, it's about a couple of things. It's about using it as fuel, as my diet would say, how to use it to feed that which you want to bring forward to make change, right? And in that using it as fuel, I think the question then becomes if you're skillful and thoughtful in that 2 seconds that you're trying to decide what you're going to do about this, right?
Yeah.
Your skill, the question becomes, is this a tool or a weapon?
Yeah.
And we can use, it has a myriad of uses, but what is going to be my most skillful, thoughtful, true response in this moment? And if I'm asking that question and listening, I don't have to be locked into one different way. I can really be present and in the moment. And sometimes, and even if the choice is that I'm going to do the most loving thing in this moment, it may still, the words may come out the same. Like the same words may come that came before that loving moment, but it's laced and drenched in love. That action, those words are drenched in love. And sometimes for me, like learning the difference between holding anger and containing it, that's also different. To let it mature, to let it reveal what it's meant for. I think is what we do when we can contain it. And right now I'm in containment, right? Around some things. And I really am waiting somewhere, right? I think that's the difference between holding it and making it into a knot, right? Is that I'm waiting for the love to come forward in that anger. Because it's there. And how can I gain the skills and the awareness to be an effective agent for that? And it might take 5 seconds, it might take 5 years. I think that's important, and I'm saying it like it's this whole process, but it really is. It can often just be taking that breath and putting the mother, your heart, and your awareness in that moment. And that applies to everything. There's nothing that's exclusive from that. Whether I'm talking to my roommate or I'm talking to a bigot across the line from me, right? It's the same movement.
And I'm going to say one more thing. I want to make sure Rashid can come back. We're still having a few technical issues, but from what I'm hearing from everyone, so far is that that to manage what we're managing, it is a lot of emotional labor. Like we have to do emotional labor because if we don't, we're going to end up whooping someone's ass. Basically, including that person who calls us, the N word or whatever word is our trigger. We have many words. Including that person who's trying to hurt us by degrading us through language. And the amount of labor that we have to put in to keep ourselves safe and to keep us from hurting other people. And that's just the weight sometimes. That's the weight that we're always wanting about managing as well. And so we're going to try one more time for Rashid. If we can get you up. If not, we're going to move towards closing and transitioning into our last practice tonight. There we go.
Yay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah. Yeah, I really don't use the word control either,
Yeah.
because when I think about control, I think about being on meditation retreats with white teachers and mostly white practitioners, and
Yep.
you know, when things get uncomfortable, they want us to control our anger, and oftentimes that's associated with being quiet and just being quiet and still.
Yeah.
So I won't use the word control, but I usually invite people to explore, is it possible to actually go for a walk with your anger? Can you carry it with you on the bus? Can you carry it with you while you're riding your bike? And for me, that it's really the experience of, you can be here as long as you need to be here, and I'll be here with you. And when I open that up to myself and I invite others to do that, what I usually begin to also do is kind of like see, where does this anger express itself in my body?
Yeah.
Like, is there a place in my body where anger usually resides? And not, can I breathe in it, not to get rid of it, but can I breathe in it so that more space can be there, so that I don't move into forms of aggression and violence towards myself? And when I start doing that, it usually carries me at some point to lying on the ground, just laying on the earth, and surrendering the tension in my body, surrendering the anger, the feelings, and allowing it to flow into the earth, and allowing the earth to hold it. But the earth can be, you know, substituted with the mother, Jesus, the Buddha. It can be any refuge, but for me, a physical, the physical touch of the earth kind of helps me to feel like I'm being held in that moment, and the anger is being held too. It's no longer mine. Yep.
Again, it goes back to refuge.
Yep.
You know, and I think in order to be in the world and to you know, and this isn't just this is about just being in the world, period, regardless of who you are and how you identify. It's, for me, really acknowledging that we all need a source of refuge. And what scares me are those folks who believe that they don't need refuge. You know, particularly because when that anger comes up, when that rage comes up, where do you put it? What's holding you? You know,
Exactly.
because if nothing's holding you, if nothing's like channeling and grounding that energy, often that's going to be expressed as violence towards people you may deem as being, not all the time, but sometimes people you consider being weaker than you. You know.
Yep.
Or people that you have been conditioned to see as not as validated or as valued as you.
Exactly.
You know, and I'll, you know, just say this. You know, I think one of the things that, for me, that I've had to really work with is the rage and the anger as a cisgender man. You know, conditioned in patriarchy.
Yep.
You know, having that as an edge, as a front line for me, you know, or what I see out in the world is like this thing of white rage, you know, that is all coming from pain. It's all coming from the trauma of being conditioned and racialized and gendered in ways that are completely against, you know, ultimately who and what we are. You know. We can be racialized and gendered and, you know, whatever way, but like it has to be spacious and liberated.
Yeah.
You know, not a cage in a box, or, you know, that we find ourselves trapped in. You know.
And it's kind of like, you know, it's like, how come whenever you know, a Black man is experiencing any emotion, the only emotion, unless it's like joy, it's always anger. You know, it's like, do you have another vocabulary word that you can use to describe emotions other than anger that's associated with Black men?
Yeah.
You know, so
yeah. Absolutely. And I can go on and on about this, but I better not. So I want to kind of bring us to a close now. We've gone 30 minutes over. So I want to first just start our closing by deeply thanking all of our panelists, our participants, not just, definitely everyone, Baba Devi and Siddhartha and Shane and Rashid, definitely thanking them for their time, for their sharing, for their vulnerability. But I want to thank all the teachers today. I want to thank, Martine and Surya Devi and Brenda and Baba Devi again. I want to thank Anji for leading the poetry. I want to thank Siddhartha again for leading the People of African Descent space. I think Ganga Devi and Gopi Ma did the white folks space. I want to thank them as white allies holding that space. And who else? Bripa Trinley. Thank you, Trinley, for holding the space for the meditation practice today. So I want to thank all the teachers for just really stepping up and offering practices today for us. I want to thank again the panelists for showing up and offering this incredible insight into the work of liberation and holding Blackness all together. We can go on and on and on, with this. This is a lot of energy. I know there are many, many questions and 10 questions that we didn't get to. I really apologize for that. I want to thank also everyone who worked behind the scenes, as tech folks, as moderators, as just like people setting up everything. I want to thank both the volunteers and the staff of Kashi Atlanta. I want to thank the volunteers, and staff of Gumi Sparsha as well, for everyone just coming together. I want to thank Alex, who's working behind the scenes, supporting this crowdcast, and it's been so glitchy tonight. So he's held that, really well. So just a multitude of thanks to everyone, a multitude of thanks to the lineages, to all the teachers, to Majaya, for Kashi, to the teachers of the Gumi Sparsha, and the Kagyu lineage of Tibetan Buddhism is one of our parent lineages. So all the teachers of the Kagyu school of Tibetan Buddhism, we just honor and remember our teachers. And to close out this space, we're going to transition directly into the Ganachakra. And there maybe is a link at the bottom of the screen to take you directly there. If not, you can go back to Kashi webpage to get the link, and we'll start our process there. So just bringing our attention back into the space, just a brief closing, just bringing our attention again back to the seat. Okay. Just noticing the seat, noticing the weight of our bodies, noticing the sensations of our bodies making contact with the seat. And I invite you to thank the seat for holding you during this conversation. Dropping your attention even further down into the earth, touching the earth again, thanking the earth for holding us during this conversation. And just in the same way Rashid talked about, I wonder if you can just let the earth kind of hold whatever you're struggling with right now, to drop that energy down into the earth and let the earth hold it. We turn our attention back to our gratitude, and if we can just extend this energy of gratitude to our panelists tonight, and even extend our gratitude to everyone who came together to make today's celebration happen. And we thank our benefactors, our folks around us, our guides, our deities, the mother, for holding us during this conversation as well. And so on behalf of our gathering, I dedicate the energy, the merit, the virtue of this dialogue, of our time together. I dedicate this out to the world, that all beings may be free from the suffering of systems, of the suffering of the binary, the suffering of duality, the suffering of hate, and marginalization and oppression, the suffering of othering, being othered, and then of doing the othering. May we all be liberated into this intense, fierce, fantastic state of love, compassion, of spaciousness. May we arm ourselves with the tools of deep, transformative, liberatory emotional labor. That our emotional labor not only frees ourselves, but all beings. May all beings be free. May all beings be liberated. Thank you all so much for your practice, for your time, for your generosity. All right. Thank you all again. We're going to transition over to the Zoom space. As we make the transition, we're going to do just a very simple, what we call a Gana chakra, which is in Tibetan, we call it sok. The Sanskrit word is Gana chakra. It means feast offering. And all you need is just a little bit of food. Just get a saucer, literally just like, a little handful of crackers, chips, some candy, a cookie, just something really simple, a piece of fruit, just something really simple that we can use as a foundation to offer to the beings that we're going to offer to. This is going to be very similar to the fire puja that we offered today, and this is going to close up all the energy that we've unleashed, and this is going to be a final act of generosity, and then we'll go into our just like dance party, which I really hope that we all do that, because we really need to move, some energy around through dance, and whatever movement we choose to do, it's important to move. Okay, so we're gonna close this space down, and everyone please transition over to the Zoom. The Zoom room is open, and just take the next 10 minutes to transition over, get a little bit of food, and also maybe a little bit to drink, some water or something would be nice to have as well. Okay, so thank you everyone, and I'll see you in 10 minutes. Okay, for the soul. All right.